The Forum at 8 with Xolani Gwala.
It is now 8 minutes after 8. Welcome to the Forum at 8 here on SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader. Well, the question this morning is, South Africa ready to be fracked? Should fracked gas join the country's future energy mix is what we would like to talk about here on the program. What are your thoughts on this ongoing debate about fracking in the Karoo specifically, but generally in South Africa? 0891 104 208. We'll be taking your calls a little later on, but also send me an email at gwalax@sabc.co.za. gwalax@sabc.co.za. SMS is at 34701. What do you think about this ongoing discussion here? Let me just quickly welcome my guests on the program this morning, starting here with me in studio. Bonang Mohale is Chairman and Country GM Commercial of Shell South Africa Pty Limited. Very good morning to you, Mr. Mohale. I thank you for your time.
Good morning, Babu Kwala.
And thanks indeed for making time and joining us here on the program. On the line, we're joined by Jonathan Dill. He's the chairman of the Treasure Karoo Action Group. He's in our Seapoint studios. Jonathan, good morning to you.
Morning to you, Xolani, and hello to Bonang.
All right, thanks indeed, Jonathan. He's putting on his headphones. He'll be with you in a minute. On the line, Dr. Pham Lin. He's a hydrogeologist with the Institute of Groundwater Studies at the University of the Free State. Dr. Pham Lin, good morning.
Good morning to all of you.
Thanks indeed for coming through.
Pleasure.
Much appreciated. Let's go to the beginning of this one. Perhaps starting with you, Mr. Mohale, here with me in the studio. Why do we need fracking in South Africa?
Yeah, the reason why Shell, amongst other international oil companies, is really interested in fracking. It's because the gas that we get from fracking lends itself very well to generating electricity. In South Africa, there's 50 million of us. 10 million South Africans do not have any access to energy whatsoever. Every morning they go to the bush, they cut down a few trees just to be able to warm the water that they will then be able to use just for washing, for cooking, and indeed for heating. And gas has been proven worldwide to be a better, cleaner, much more efficient form of energy. So in South Africa, we say that Shell is abundant because we know that there is more gas reserves in the world than there is crude reserves. Number two, we say it is acceptable because it emits less CO2 emissions or less pollution than coal-fired power stations. Okay. And then lastly, we say it's affordable, which is about 1/10 the cost of coal-fired power stations.
All right, we'll go back to some of the points you're making in a minute, but how much gas or reserves do we have in South Africa?
In fact, we are very blessed. The International Energy Agency of the US of A estimates that we are sitting in the Karoo at about 485 trillion cubic feet. Just to give you an idea, when countries discover 2 trillion TCFs, it justifies building a pipeline. Petro SA, which is the national oil company, when they discovered this gas in Mossel Bay, all these years they've only ever used 0.02 TCFs. So this is the 5th largest gas reserves in the world, and there is no reason why, as a people, we can't find a responsible way of bringing it to production so that we can improve the quality of lives of the majority of our people.
Let's go back to the first point you made before I bring in my other guests. You say emission clean. People are talking about methane, which is worse than CO2.
No, in fact, it's not. Because methane, remember, it's a gas that is naturally occurring. You find it in clouds. Whenever you do coal mining, often methane is a byproduct of that. That's why mines from time to time explode, they cause fires. So when we talk about gas, we talk normally about natural gas on the one hand, and then unconventional gas on the other. Unconventional because it is difficult to get to and indeed extract. So there are 3 types of unconventional gas. Coal bed methane is one of them, shale gas is another, and then tight gas.
And you're interested in shale gas?
In shale gas.
Because and in extracting shale gas, what you do is you use a lot of water. Hundreds of millions of water. You mix that with the chemicals.
Absolutely.
And then the outcome is polluted wells.
Not really. In fact, this thing called fracking, the scientific term is hydraulic fracturing. So in simple English, what it means is that we are using water, 99.5% mixture of water and sand, at high pressure at depths of 2,500 to 4,000 meters below the surface into the shale rock itself to stimulate the gas to be able to be free flowing. Remember, this gas we didn't discover. It was discovered by two companies, Mosgas and indeed
and that was 1965.
1965. That's when they
but
found
they
this
didn't.
gas.
They didn't extract until now because of the side effects. Is it
No.
not?
The only reason why they couldn't exploit this gas is because the technology did not exist at that time. The reason why it's called tight gas is because the gas is found inside the rock. Its porosity and permeability is very low. The distance it travels within that rock, and to an extent that it can travel through the rock. In 30 years, it would have traveled a space that is no longer than a meter, for instance. So the two technologies have now come together in the last 60 years. One is the ability to drill wells, not only vertically, but horizontally at a distance. And then lastly is this wonderful, safe technology called fracking, where you are really putting water and sand at high pressure.
Well, all right.
And the chemicals are only 0.05%.
Jonathan is going to respond to the issue of safety in particular, but I would like you to give us examples where this has been done safely.
Oh, in fact, in the US of A, this is done in 4 continents, by the way. The only continent where it's not being done up until now is Africa. So in the US of A, 1.1 million wells have been successfully drilled by the industry. Just last year, Shell alone drilled about 60,000 wells.
In the US. Is it safe?
It's very safe.
Is it acceptable by the public?
And by the way, it's not us who are saying it's safe. Probably 4 authorities. Lisa Scott of the Environmental Protection Agency in 2010 said fracking done responsibly, it's a perfectly safe exercise.
Let me just point to an article that I saw yesterday on CNN, posted by Farid Zakaria. It was on CNN just yesterday about the same thing. It was talking about the US and how successful it has been. And these are the responses. Somebody said, the city of New York has banned hydrofracking anywhere near the reservoirs and water sources that supply the city because they know the risks of hydrofracking are far too great. They're going to say NYC can afford the lawyers necessary to keep hydrofracking at bay. But in the small towns where water wells are being poisoned, roads are being ragged, departments are busier than they can handle, ER departments rather, crime is rising, they can't afford the battle of big gas. That was just yesterday. There were a whole lot of other responses. People are saying, well, is it, you create jobs, but at what cost? What are the costs? How do you compensate people whose well waters have been poisoned, whose rural landscapes have been destroyed, and who awake to fracking sounds every morning? I say to you that even in the US, this is not a settled argument. People are very much opposed to it. It's not safe.
In fact, in the US, there are more states where fracking is happening than those that have actually banned fracking. Like I say, this is not a new technology. It might be new to South Africans, but remember, it's a 60-year-old.
But to say it is safe is overstating the case, because people on the ground are opposed to it in the US. It's the big gas companies that are continuing with fracking, yet people on the ground are opposed to it.
No, not all people are opposed to fracking.
Those who are benefiting are not opposed to it.
No, in fact, a majority of states derive a lot of revenues. And I mean, in Pennsylvania, in Ground Birch, we have created, just as Shell, probably about 600,000 jobs. And we pay taxes. And we ensure that we do hydraulic fracturing with utmost respect to the environment and indeed to the people.
Let me draw you again to this response about the city of New York that is banning these things because they have money to pay the lawyers. What about poor city of the Karoo that may not have money to pay the lawyers so that they can ban the same way that New York is now banned?
In fact, there is no need to hire lawyers. Remember, the South African legislation is probably the most stringent that Shell has ever met anywhere else in the world.
So if you say there's no need to hire lawyers, you are saying let's not do it straight away before we get to a point where we need to ban it. They have banned it anywhere near the water reservoirs, and you need water to do this process.
Yes, but remember, the water that you need for fracking is probably 1/10 the water that you'd need anyway to do any coal mining operations. But the reason why I'm saying it might not even be necessary to hire lawyers, it's because, remember, fracking happens in 4 continents. US of A is only one of them. We are in Australia. We are in China. Where
but
we have
146 regions in the world have actually banned it, and or have a moratorium. Yeah. So it's happening. Yes, I agree. But 146 have banned it.
But like I said at the beginning, remember there are more states in the world where fracking happens than those that have actually banned fracking.
Okay,
Or
just clarify that for me.
Yeah.
How many are you operating in?
Yeah, we said in the US of A alone, there's 1.1 million wells that have been successfully fracked.
Yeah.
Shell alone, just this last year, has developed 60,000 wells. And up until now, there's not been somebody who has come and said the wells that have been designed, operated safely by Shell have contaminated any water aquifers.
But I'm saying to you, currently, hydraulic fracking is either banned or under moratorium in 146 regions in the world, including South Africa.
No.
So it means that a lot of people are concerned about the effects.
Let me talk about South Africa because it's closer to home. Fracking is not banned in South Africa.
There's a moratorium.
What the minister has done in February and then cabinet endorsed in April was to say, let's learn more about this 60-year-old technology because it is new to us. And it is up to the government to then take a view. And our expectation is that probably we are a matter of months, not years away from government then coming back to South Africans to say, we have sent people to these sites. We have looked at the science. We have put in an interministerial team to inform ourselves. And based on this available information, then they will come back to us to say yay or nay.
Oh, all right. Just a last one before I go again to Jonathan. How many jobs will fracking create in South Africa?
Now, the study that was done by the late Tony Twine, and he used econometrics modeling. He said, of the almost 500 TCFs, for short, if we bring only 10% to production and 20% in the two scenarios, the jobs that will be created move from 300,000 to 700,000. He talks about the physical injection to the fiscus of 80 billion that goes to 200 billion. He talks about the GDP growth that moves from 3.3% to 9.6%. So that you understand by order of magnitude, the coal mining industry in 2010 only added 1.8%.
But
to the
are
GDP.
You aware that in New York, the industry has been accused of overstating the job creation record following the release of research by Pennsylvania's Keystone Research Center in June last year? In fact, right across the U.S., the industry has been largely accused of overstating the job creation capacity and record.
Let me tell you just the jobs that you can look at people and touch that have been created by Shell in the US of A. There's a recent study that has been done by HIS Global Insight. 600,000 US jobs have been created by shale gas development, with projections expected to grow to 870,000. In 2015, this number will move to 1.6 million. These are the real people that are getting salaries, that are looking after their families,
all right,
and are buying cars.
Jonathan, if that were to be the case, then we need these jobs. We have 7 million South Africans roaming the streets who would like to be employed. Why not fracking then?
Zolani, at the outset, I would like to compliment you roundly on the very good research that you clearly have done on this subject. You are well informed and you are bringing a measure of credibility to this debate. I have to begin by taking issue again with Bonang's statements, and I'd like to first refer to something that came up in the media recently where Mrs. Jackie Maitland, representing Shell, said that Shell has got the interests of South Africa at heart. And I think that it is time for Shell to get off this old and worn and used out soapbox of theirs. They do not have the interests of South Africa at heart. They have the interests of their shareholders at heart. Shell are here for the money, not for South Africa.
Why?
Because they're a company, they're a corporate entity, and they need to make money, and they have to answer to their shareholders. They are not philanthropists.
But in the event that they create jobs, and as many jobs as they're promising, then good for everybody involved.
Absolutely, that would be a byproduct of it. But I think it needs to be honestly said, just as anybody else and any other global corporate entity should say, we are here for the money. We're not here. We're not philanthropists. We're not here to answer to sort out the problems of South Africa. Now, if one looks at what is commonly projected by the oil and gas industry around the world, shale gas creates jobs and reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and it generates revenues. And on the scale that Shell promises it in this country, if we were to take this backwards 25 years, so if shale gas and this technology existed 25 years ago, Are they saying that everybody in South Africa would have a job, we'd all have abundant and unlimited and cheap energy, and our greenhouse gas emissions would be a thing of the past? Clearly not, to answer the question for them. Mr. Mogale also, I have taken this issue up with him and his executives in many shale gas conferences, some of them with international speakers present. This story of the industry of 1.1 million wells, so glibly put out, being safely drilled. Mr. Mogale is talking about since the very advent of fracking in the early 1930s, where they started fracking wells by dropping dynamite down the well. That, and then eventually starting to use water, and those were vertical wells. The type of fracking that we're talking about in South Africa today is high volume, horizontal, slick water fracking. Much higher pressures, greater quantities of water, far more intricate mix of chemicals and that they apply, and it is a totally different technology. In fact, even in round about 2000, they were only doing internationally horizontal wells. About 2,000 were drilled, and Halliburton or Chesapeake, I think, which is one of the biggest drilling companies in the world, had only done towards the end of last year had only completed 11,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so the statistics are questionable. They're not settled. And I don't want to get into a technical thing because we're not into a technical debate this morning, which is what Mr. Mogale has attempted to do. We want to talk about the facts.
Let's talk about the facts, though, because the International Energy Agency just last week released some really interesting statistics, and they were covered in the article I mentioned yesterday. One, the Americans, and this was written by one Fareed Zakaria, who says the golden rules of a golden age of gas, and the Americans are leading in as far as this golden age is concerned. There is absolutely in the US, well, at least in some people's mind, no doubt that it's the golden age of gas. US complete exporting gas now, no longer importing as it used to. About 20,000 wells have been drilled in the past 10 years alone, creation of hundreds of thousands of jobs, and a guaranteed supply of gas for perhaps 100 years. And I mean, gas is important. 100 years supply, that's quite important.
It's absolutely. And I think that, the fossil fuel and renewable energy debate is something for a different time. I would just like to put some facts on the table.
Please do.
A country like Germany 3 weeks ago, admittedly during the daylight hours, 50% of Germany's electricity was supplied from renewable energy resources. That is in a country where there are more cloudy days than sunny days. South Africa, together with Brazil, has the best solar irradiation in the world. And solar, the renewable energy, will also create jobs, and they will be sustainable and they will be longer lasting. They can be deployed far more rapidly than fracking. For instance, something that Shell and the others are not telling us here is that it will be 10 to 12 years before they would get into full-scale production. So all of these hundreds and thousands of jobs that are promised the South Africans that are unemployed today will materialize 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now, the majority of those. And
but the argument here, Jonathan, is that if they materialize at all, we are willing to wait. The question: South Africa needs jobs.
Yeah, I don't think that we're willing to wait. I think that if this type of money, this $200 million investment that Shell is touting around South Africa and flashing around in front of our government, if that were put into something like renewables, we could start generating jobs in 6 months, not 10 years. And I think for the people that are waiting for jobs,
sustainable jobs is what we're
absolutely, they're very sustainable jobs.
All right.
Shell's field in the United States at the Pinedale Anticline, they have 425 producing wells. These have now, the fracking is finished, the drilling and fracking and all of those big teams with all the people and the security guards and the trucks and everybody else is gone. They are capped wells. It's what Bonang Mogale calls a little Christmas tree the size of a coffee table. There are 425 of those, and they are supervised by 66 skilled technical employees. All of those millions of jobs are not there. They're gone.
All right, let's bring in Dr. Pham Lin. What is your experience there, Doctor? Do you think that the jobs will come out of fracking or not?
As an academic, I take the middle route. I mean, I cannot be.
You're not sitting on the fence now, are you?
Because then I lose my credibility. But I've also been around a bit. I was actually in Pinedale last week and also in Texas. And let me tell you, well, I'm a geologist, I'm not an economist, but what I've seen, and I'll tell you what, I've spoken to the people in a little town like Pinedale, and Pinedale is a bit different, and I've listened to Penang. Tight gas is a bit different from shale gas. Tight gas is where they drill vertical holes, a cluster of vertical holes, and that's what's been done in Pinedale. The little town, I've spoken to a lot of people in the town. The town itself, there is a bloom in the town. They built a number of hotels and things, and there's 3 drilling companies working in that area. There is work, but the town itself got a lot of money from the company. So the town itself is going forward lately. Then I went to the Barnett as well on this trip, and I went to Denton and the little town Polder just around that, where most of the fracking has been done at the moment. And I've spoken to, when I saw a farmer, I drove into the farm, I spoke to the farmers, I went to the sheriff, I spoke to the sheriff, and what they told me, well, let me first say what the sheriff told me. He said that there wasn't a lot of jobs created in the town itself because it's close to Dallas, it's close to Fort Worth, but they've built new schools to them. They upgraded a lot of stuff. I asked him about the roads. He said to me, well, in the beginning they had a lot of problems with the roads. Then they had a meeting with the drilling companies, and I don't think Shell is involved in that area. I think it's Devon. These guys decided on specific roads. They've rebuilt the roads. They built new roads for their trucks. What I've seen on the farms is they built the little roads that they've built onto the fracking pads was quite nice, but it's short roads is a bit different from what is going on in the Karoo. So it's not exactly the same, and that's our point as academics. In South Africa, the situation is a bit different from the rest of the world. I'm not sure
so we
if it
can't
will create
use
jobs.
In other words, what you're saying,
tell me it creates a lot of jobs. Other places it didn't create jobs, but there was a boom in the towns. So it's very difficult to say what's going to happen in South Africa. But I also listened to your comment on New York report. Well, it's actually the S. Geis report that came out, and I've just got the figures right in front of me here.
Yeah.
I've also read that report, and they forecasted in New York, which is not a big fracking area, about 53,000 jobs. That's what they forecasted. Well, between 13 and 53,000 for New York. But you must remember, these jobs are not specifically for the people in the towns. They've got to build pipes. Somewhere they've got to manufacture the pipes. They've got to build trucks somewhere. And all of those are being calculated in these figures where they come up to 53,000.
But, let me, and I hear what you're saying, and we're going to go back to that. But what I want to ask you is specifically on issues of water, because part of the worry is that water will be poisoned and so on. Is there anything that can be done in order to ensure that water remains safe, that the water wells are not poisoned?
Okay, that is one of the. That is for me one of the unknowns. I mean, I'm a geologist. I speak a lot to farmers' unions, and I also grew up in the Karoo, and I know what the worth of water is in the Karoo. And from day one on, I was one of the guys that on all the public forums that I've been, I said, do we have enough water for the Karoo to frack? And I'm still not sure. And I've asked this a number of times on forums. I said people must prove to me that there's enough water. And the only way we can do that is go and drill a number of these little well fields, pump them at a specific rate and for the time span, the duration that they will need to frack, and show to me there's enough water. I mean, we can do a little test on a number of areas in the Karoo to prove if there's enough water or not. What I've seen, and one of the things they do in Texas nowadays, which was for me something that I didn't know, is, and this is what a farmer told me, what they do nowadays, they build a little dirt dam, they line it before they start with the drilling operations. Yeah. They drill a few boreholes, and they pump the water into these dams, so they pot up the water. Then they use these irrigation pipes, the ones that we use on the farms, those aluminium ones. They use those to pump the water to the areas where they frack, and afterwards they just take them away. Okay. They tell the farmer he can use the dam and he can use the boreholes.
All right, Doc, let me ask you to hold your thoughts there.
In Denton area in Texas. I don't know if they do it in other places in Texas, but that's what they do there now.
All right.
If
Doc,
it will work in the Karoo, I don't know.
All right, hold your thought right there, Doc. I need to take the news headlines and then I'll come back. I'll ask Bonang Mohale to respond to that question about whether or not we have enough water in the Karoo for us to start fracking, but also Jonathan Deal will weigh in on this one. Weigh in on this one as well on 0891 104 208, 0891 104 208. Send me SMSs at 34701, emails gwala@sabc.co.za.
The Forum at 8 on SAFM.
Right, we're talking about fracking in South Africa. Are we ready for it? Should fracked gas join the country's future energy mix? And we have in our studios Mr. Bonang Mohale, who's the chairman and country GM commercial of Shell South Africa Pty Ltd. And also from our Seapoint studios, we joined there by Jonathan Deal. He's the chairman of Treasure Karoo Action Group. And on the line, Dr. Pham Lin, hydrogeologist, Institute of Groundwater Studies, University of Free State. I'm going to go to the lines as well on 0891 104 208 in a minute, 0891 104 208. But before I do so, Mr. Mohale, we had a comment or a question from Dr. Pham Lin about whether or not in the Karoo we have enough water to do this in the first place.
Kolani, thank you very much. Let me thank Dr. Pham Lin's very balanced perspective. In fact, here's the benefit of fracking already. Since 2009, when we got a technical cooperation permit, we now have the Atlas groundwater study that has been done in 2011 by Dr. Pham Lin's own colleagues. These are hydrologists, about 12 of them, with a combined 250 years of Karoo-specific groundwater experience. And what they found is that although this is really the first of its kind in South Africa, they identified 10 key factors that contribute to the water that we now know in the Karoo. They found that the Atlas indicates things like aquifer yield, groundwater quality, recharge, generally increases from west to east and from south to north in the eastern Karoo. And they found that in shallow aquifers, these are the ones that are less than 300 meters, these are well understood and indeed very well documented. The work that they are doing now is in the deeper geological or hydrogeologist.
Right. Mr. Mohale, and again, I know it's very technical. I would like you, if you may, just make it very simple. Do we have enough water in the Karoo or not?
We know that we have enough water in the Karoo.
We have enough water in the Karoo for fracking to happen.
For fracking, because what we have said in the 7 commitments that we made to South Africans is that, one, we will never compete with the people of Karoo for their water, for their animals, and indeed their agriculture. The water that we typically use in fracking is found at depths of 2,500 to 4,000 meters below the surface. This is dirty water. It's full of bacteria. We clean it. We make sure that it's not toxic and it's not radioactive. And we recycle up to 50 to 80% of this water. So when people do...
And the rest, where does the rest go?
Yeah. After we have recycled and cleaned it, normally we make it available to the community. So you say you recycle about 50 to 80, which means that there is a difference. Where does the difference go? Yeah. Is it possible that the difference is disposed of in localities and perhaps then is poisonous and dangerous for people? No, in fact, part of that water, although it's clean, we give it normally to municipalities. They use that water to water most of their sporting field, their golfing courses, but also this is the water that they use for cleaning the town. When you go to Cape Town at night, you'll see that they use powerful hoses to clean the roads. This is the type of water, brown water that can be used.
All right, I'm going to ask my other guests then to comment on that.
But last comment that I just wanted to make about really shale gas is, let's imagine for a moment, where would Qatar be today if they didn't have gas? Today, Qatar is the world's biggest exporter of liquefied and natural gas. And this only happened a few years ago. The US of A, only 5 years ago, was a net importer of energy, highly dependent on gas and in fact, energy that came mostly from the Middle East. Today, 5 years later, only 5 years later, the US of A is a net exporter.
I think the question, though, is about the cost. At what cost are we willing to do all of those developments? I think that's the question. Anyway, we'll answer that question.
1/10 the cost of coal-fired power station.
not financial costs, but health costs as well is also another question. But anyway, let's hear from Bukhosi first in Sandton. Good morning to you, Bukhosi.
Tolani.
Hello. Hey, it's very cold, Baba.
Yeah. Rob Mukhali.
I guess we need a bit of warming up.
To answer this one. Fracking has been banned in France and in Bulgaria. It's been suspended in the United Kingdom, Quebec, parts of Germany, and Australia. Secondly, preliminary studies in Ohio have confirmed that fracking causes seismic activity, as well as a study that was conducted in the UK in April of this year confirmed that fracking causes seismic activity. Now, with Quebec, not far from the Karoo, with the danger of this seismic activity being triggered by fracking, what do we have in our hands?
Okay.
Thirdly, Colin, quickly, fracking has caused so much of methane gas near where fracking takes place. For instance, in Colorado, there's this talk about flaming kitchen taps. I don't know whether he has heard about that. There's so much methane coming out of kitchen taps that you can actually ignite the methane that comes out there.
Okay.
And, Shell is always chasing profits. Look at the damage that they've done in the environment in Nigeria. This is what we are going to end up with in the Karoo.
Okay, all right. That's Bukhosi. Thank you very much. David in Grafenat. Good morning to you, David.
Hi, Kalani.
Hi, welcome.
Kalani, I think what we need to realize is we're basically a civilization that's based on combustion, and we're continuously looking for carbon to burn. And this fracking is just an extension of that. To say that something's been done in the United States, etc., is of no comfort, because the United States have done some horrendous things to our climate and our environment. And basically, we had a deputy minister talk about these particles of gas as a blessing from God. Well, when something's trapped 4 kilometers underground in tiny particles, it's hardly a blessing compared to the abundant sunshine and wind resources that we've got right on top of the ground. And so I think, to go and copy what's happening in the rest of the world, we hosted the climate summit here, and it's so contrary to everything that was said there to embark on this fracking. We've had representatives from the Karoo go over to the States and visit these wells. There's some of these pools of water that when the water is extracted after fracking, if any wildlife so much as takes a sip from that water, it doesn't make it 3 meters from the pool. It dies instantly. These are dams that are left to evaporate after these toxic chemicals have been extracted from the wells. I don't think we're getting the full picture here. There are huge communities in America that have been irrevocably damaged forever. They have to have water trucked into them. They have to have what they call these hippos. It's basically a black plastic trailer where they have to drink water from that trailer for the rest of their lives. These are communities that used to have fresh rivers and etc. going through them. So I think we've got to ask ourselves as a civilization, when do we stop pursuing carbon? If we discover gas in the Kruger Park, are we going to frack the entire Kruger Park? Okay. What are we doing to our planet?
All right, that's David in Grafenat. Thank you. Clive in Somerset West. Hello, Clive.
Morning,
Hi.
Kalani.
Welcome.
My point is, the situation cries out for a truly independent and publicly pronounced inquiry into the cost-benefit, the comparative cost-benefits of fracking against renewables, which in this case, the obvious one is solar power. If we don't get that, then I fear the worst. And unfortunately, fortunately, anything that was done along those lines would need time. At least, probably, I'm guessing, years rather than months to do it properly. And if we don't get that, then it'll be a sad day for South Africa.
All right, Clive. Thank you, Clive in Somerset West. And Neil is in Durban. Hello, Neil.
Yes, thanks, Kolani, for taking my call. Just a few quick points.
Yeah.
Let's just forget about Shell and one-on-one situation. Let's look at it in general. If any company is going to do fracking, as we said, the main thing is probably predicting 12 years down the line of jobs. Can they show a return on that job action in a shorter space of time, like 6 months, 2 years? That's one point. The other point is on the water issue. Can they show and produce an oasis of water before they make the major capital investment? And then lastly, whenever we come on issues like this, it is important that we just don't object for the sake of objecting. Let's look at things constructively and find an happy medium, because places in South Africa is wide and far, and they need development.
Sure.
So we've got to get some reality somewhere along the line.
All right.
Thanks,
I thank you very much, Neil. I'll take more calls, by the way. 0891 104 208, 0891 104 208. I'm going to come to you in the studio with me, Mr. Mohale, in a minute. But let me bring in again the academic here, Dr. Pham Lin. Your thoughts on what some of the callers have been saying here. Specifically, somebody made reference to poisoned wells and the effect that they've had in certain parts of the U.S. long after the fracking has happened.
Paul said a very sensible thing. We must look at this very, very objectively. And that's what we try to do as academics. It is so. There was a lot of ugly things being done in the past. And nobody can argue against that. But what people must remember that most of these borers that's been drilled in the U.S. is not horizontal fracking borers. Most of them were vertical borers and I'm not propagating for fracking here. What I say is, I've went there. I've seen what's been done, and it is a fact, and we can't discard that. There is a lot of improvement been lately in the U.S., and I'm not talking about Shell. I'm talking all over. There is an improvement in the chemicals. They're still not good enough, but there is an improvement. A lot of the pollution that we had in the borers was from normal gas. It wasn't from fracking. The fracking per se, as they've done it in the last 5-6 years, the horizontal fracking, there's not so many borers as people think there were. Regarding the chemicals, that is for me one of the issues. I mean, some of my colleagues has commented on that lately. We don't know that, and I've said it many times on forums. At the moment, we don't know what will happen. The Karoo is completely different from the rest of the world. We've got a lot of dolerite in the Karoo. That's magmatic intrusions. We don't know if we have the dolerite at that depth. And what we as academics argue is we won't know before we've drilled a few exploration borers. I know a lot of people will tell you that if we've done that, then there's a perception that people must carry on with fracking. As academics, we say we will not know. We don't know if there's a pressure head underground at that depth, so that water will push up to the surface. We don't know if the chemicals will move up. We do know that there is, and I've also spoken to the people in Pinedale and those places now. There is methane in the water even before we start fracking, even in South Africa. That's a natural thing, but we don't know at this moment. We can argue as much as we want. We don't know what the issues will be, and the only way we will find out is to drill a few borers, let academics monitor that, and that's the only way we will get the answers for this country.
All right, let me go back to Jonathan then. Jonathan, if we were to improve the methodology of getting this gas out of the surface, if we were to improve the technology and ensure that the chemicals are also improved, would you agree that it be done then in the Karoo?
Well, Lani, I can't submit myself to the environmental damage that would take place above ground, the scale of the activity. But we're running out of time here, and there are 2 or 3 points that I need to make to respond to what has been said already.
Sure.
Mr. Mohale holds out their Pinedale operation in Wyoming as a showcase. Well, it might interest the listeners to know that the air pollution in the state of Wyoming, which was and is a rural state like the Karoo, is higher than the air pollution in the center of Los Angeles. That has happened since fracking started. No contest about that. Secondly, Mr. Mohale...
Let me just get a quick response on that specific point. I think that's an important point. How do you respond, Mr. Mohale?
In fact, I think the response was set by Fatir Birol, the International Energy Agency chief economist, who actually said that fracking done responsibly it's a perfectly safe process.
But apparently the city that you hold as an example, there's a higher level of pollution than there is in, you said, in
the center of Los Angeles.
In the center of LA.
In fact, it can be true, because she goes on to say that, in fact, when you look at the impact of gas and the health matrices, so they measure the well-being of people. She went on to say that in the 16,000 natural
so, Lani,
gas...
we're getting into a long thing here, and I think Mr. Mukhale has had enough time. I'd also like to respond.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
all right, fine. I'm going to come back to you, because I would like us to make this simple and not technical.
Yeah, but I'd not finished my point.
No. Let's go back to Jonathan. Jonathan, you wanted to make another example. Okay, I'm going to come back to
thank
Mr.
you. I'm putting that thing on the air pollution to bed. It is a fact, and it can be proven. It is higher in the center of Los Angeles than in a rural state like Wyoming. There's no contest. The evidence exists. Mr. Mukhale has also made much of this groundwater atlas and all of these 13 geohydrologists in the University of the Free State. Well, 2 weeks ago, a professor of geohydrology from the Institute of Groundwater Studies, Professor Gerrit van Tonder, has made a complete about turn on what he said last year, and he has stated completely unequivocally, fracking will pollute groundwater, aquifers in the Karoo, and well casings and cement will fail over time. This man is a professor, he's an academic of decades of standing, and he sits in the office right next door to Dr. Pham Lin.
Now, Dr. Pham Lin, this is when Dr. Pham Lin should come in then, because the guy is sitting next door to you. Says
the Karoo Atlas, I had nothing to do with that. I mean, I wasn't part of the
Karoo Atlas. But do you agree with him there?
Yes and no. I mean,
you're on the fence. That's what it means.
We must put his work into context again. As I said, he did a model, and that's why I say we will not know before we've drilled. I mean, I value Professor van Tonder's opinion very much. He did a model for very specific instances, and that is what we don't know as academics or anybody is, will we find dolerite at that depth? All of those were based on those specific circumstances. We will have dolerite, we will have preferred pathways, etc., etc. Regarding the construction of the borers, and again, we're not sure. He based his model on if there's an annulus where there will be leakage. I don't know, and I think not one of us knows. And the people in the US that I spoke to tell me the way they do it nowadays, it's perfectly safe to construct the borers. Again, I say we don't know. We have to do it in this country. Well, not on a large scale, but if they do it on an exploratory scale, we will find out if that is indeed the case or not. I cannot speculate. I mean, as an academic, I cannot speculate. Well, I won't say speculate, but we have
I know you can't. Yeah. But all you do as academics is really to come up with models, and this is what Professor Van Tonder did.
Yes,
he came up with a model.
He came up with a model. Myself, I'm a completely different type of academic. I am a very practical academic. I say if I can drill a borehole and I can monitor that and I can measure all of that. Sometimes that is completely different from what the model tells us. I don't say he's wrong. I don't say he's right. I value his opinion.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. And I've said this many times before. The only time I will know as a person is if they've drilled a borehole for me, like some people have done in the world, and I can measure that. I can put in my probes. I can measure water levels. I can measure pressure levels. Then I will know what the answer is to this.
All right. So it's not about models. Let me read some SMSs. I know that the two of you would like to comment. I know Mr. Mukhale would want to comment, Mr. Dill as well. And I'll take Peter in the Northern Cape and maybe one or two more people just to wrap up. But some SMSs here, lots came through. Somebody says, there's no guarantee about the future of fracking, even if we deny it today. We already know of the gas's existence. That's David Mtunzi. Another one says, we don't even have enough water in South Africa at present. Fracking will dangerously impact on the food security of this country. Esme Senecal in the Karoo says, no fracking. It's an evil thing. Shell is still talking rubbish here. That's according to Esme in the Karoo. No fracking, says another SMS. Another one says, how do natives benefit? Extractive industries and rich foreign firms and the elites, just like Shell is doing in Angola and Nigeria. Big scam. That's Buin Bisho. Another SMS came through from Norman who says, why gas and no water at Carolina and and Dipslot, must we drink gas? Well, there's another one that says, we are a water-starved country. How can we even consider fracking as an option? It's insane. Kevin in Natal. Your guest is fracking crazy. Chat in Cape Town, I beg your pardon. There's also another one that says, give us an example of where water pollution actually occurred. That's all. And I'm going to ask Jonathan to respond to this one. Environment and safe water comes before profits and self-enrichment, says another SMS. The after effects of mining of the 1800s are only being felt now. How do we know if the wells left behind do not have disastrous effects on the environment, says an SMS not signed. Another one says, New York is not the Karoo. Has anyone investigated waterless gas fracking? This technology has been patented by a Canadian company called GasFrack. Joe in Bramley, if that will bring electricity to below 50 cents per unit, that will mitigate the risk. Joe, that's Joe in Bramley. Can we have concrete examples of the actual calamities caused by fracking? Perhaps, let me start with you, Jonathan, just very briefly as we wrap up, some examples of real calamities.
The town of Pavilion in Wyoming, the Environmental Protection Agency in last year completed a report. It was admittedly a preliminary report, but where they had monitored wells specifically over a period of time and in very controlled conditions, and it generated an enormous furore in the fracking fraternity because of the fact that they said that they had picked up the fracking chemicals in underground water aquifers. What you're dealing with is more than 1,000 cases before the U.S. courts at the moment where it is alleged that fracking has caused pollution. Please bear in mind that we are opposing an industry that has got the resources more than the international cigarette industry, who for more than 40 years in the United States were able to bat off the allegations that smoking causes lung cancer. Okay. And even today, those companies will tell you the same thing.
Mr. Mohale?
Yeah, the point I wanted to make is that the community health status indicators just in Fort Worth in Texas have proved that all the measurements that were done in that area after 16,000 wells were fracked showed that the health of the people actually improved. The second point I wanted to make, Golan, is that if fracking causes seismic activity, so earthquakes, then the majority of earthquakes will be in the US of A, where the majority of wells are. And the facts will show you that it's actually not there. The issue about waterless fracking, Shell has been doing this, like I say, for more than 35 years. Of course, they are looking at other opportunities to use fracking without using water. They are using propellants. They are using even gas in some instances. So, of course, it's our business. We try and do it in a responsible way. Let me just conclude by saying, here as South Africans, we have an opportunity to create a brand new industry that will give the 50 million South Africans both environmental, energy, and indeed economic benefits. So the issue of fracking, South Africans need to be very measured, done responsibly with respect to the environment and to the people. It's going to give us untold benefits.
Okay. Dr. Pham Lin, your last word for me, please.
Yes, I mean, I just look at the slide that I normally present when I give a talk on this, and I say that universities and academics all over the USA and the world differ. So what is the truth? If scientists do know, how will the public know? Now, just to give you an example, Jonathan just mentioned now the Wyoming, the pollution there. I was there last week. Now they tell me that they relook at that report, because what we do in laboratories, we send blank samples. Now they tell us that the blank samples was also polluted. So there's something wrong there. I don't know what to believe anymore, because one person tell me one thing and another person tell me something different. And I mean, that was last week. I was there, and that's what they told me now, and that wasn't Shell's people. I mean, that was the people in the town. So, as an academic, I don't know what to believe nowadays.
And that's going to make it more difficult. Yeah, it's going to be even more difficult for us than for us ordinary people to know what to believe in the story.
The only way I will know is give me a borrow where I can do research, and I will come up with an answer.
All right, maybe that's the answer then. Yeah. I thank you very much for your insights here, Dr. Pham Lin, hydrogeologist at the Institute of Groundwater Studies at the University of the Free State. I also thank Jonathan Deal, chairman of the Treasure Karoo Action Group, joining us from our Seapoint studio, as well as Mr. Bonang Mohale, chairman and country GM commercial at Shell South Africa, joining me here in studio. I thank you very much indeed, sir. And I'd like to thank the team as well, our producers, Mishosha Ndlale, Wisana Makubele, technical producer Mark Pre Trailer and Umulemo Maja today. Senior producers Lungile Mabaso and Chili Chibase. Forum at 8 producer Jake Mokoma, Chief Producer Butsi Lukoto, Executive Producers Bruce Chie and Bosi Chana. Olani Gwala will be back again for you tomorrow 6 to 9 here on SAFM. It's 9 o'clock and that means time for Morning Talk. Cheers. 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 Means time for Morning